Look at the salt shaker sitting on your kitchen table. Plain, cheap, nearly invisible. You spill a little, you sweep it into the trash without a second thought. It costs less than a cup of coffee and feels about as significant as dirt. But if you were to step into a time machine and take that exact 10-cent shaker back just a few hundred years, you wouldn't be holding a routine grocery item. You would be holding the single most violent, highly contested, and dangerous chemical compound in human history. A substance men bled for, kings hoarded, and empires collapsed trying to control. Every single cell in your body is running on an ancient ocean code, a delicate biochemical balance that requires sodium to fire a single thought across your brain. Before refrigeration, before electricity, before artificial preservatives, humanity faced a terrifying biological reality. Without a way to preserve meat, human civilization could not survive the winter. Salt wasn't a seasoning. Salt was the difference between life and mass starvation. And that simple biological necessity triggered a 5,000-year rat race that shaped the global map you look at today. Long before humans understood the chemistry of sodium chloride, nature had already forged the first conflict around it. Deep in the prehistoric wild, animals tracked natural salt licks across hundreds of miles, carving deep, visible paths into the earth. Early hunters realized a simple truth. If you follow the salt, you find the prey. The very first human trails, the pathways that eventually hardened into modern highways and global trade corridors, were laid down not by strategic military planners, but by desperate animals hunting for a rock. When our ancestors finally abandoned the nomadic life and settled down to farm, their diet shifted from raw, sodium-rich game to grain and cultivated crops. Suddenly, natural sodium vanished from their daily food supply. The human body began to crave it with a primal, desperate intensity. But finding pure, usable salt in the ancient world was a nightmare. You either had to evaporate thousands of gallons of seawater under a blistering sun, or drop men into pitch-black underground caverns to chip away at subterranean rock formations with primitive tools. In ancient China, the ruling dynasties realized something astonishing. If you controlled the salt, you control every breathing human being in the realm. People could live without silk. They could live without tea. They could even survive without gold. But they could not survive without salt. The Han Dynasty instituted the world's first state-run salt monopoly, taxing every grain that left the salt pans. That single administrative decision generated over half of the entire empire's tax revenue, funding the construction of the Great Wall of China. The monumental stone fortress meant to keep out northern invaders was quite literally paid for by a microscopic white crystal. And yet, across the globe, another rising empire was about to take this obsession to an entirely new level. Walk through the ruins of ancient Rome, and you are walking on salt. The legendary Via Salaria, the Salt Road, was built by Roman engineers specifically to transport precious loads of salt from the coastal pans of Ostia directly into the heart of the capital. Roman legionaries, the most fearsome military force on the planet, were often paid part of their wage in physical rations of salt, a payment known as salarium. It is the exact root of the word salary. When you say someone is worth their salt, you are channeling a 2,000-year-old military economic standard. To be short on salt meant mutiny. To control it meant supreme imperial authority. As the Roman Empire fractured, the value of salt only skyrocketed. By the Middle Ages, Venice rose out of a muddy lagoon not through conquest, but through ruthless maritime trade in salt. The Venetians used their salt profits to build a terrifying naval fleet, effectively holding the Mediterranean hostage. They understood a dark economic reality. If you starve a city of salt, their meat rots, their fish spoils, their armies starve, and their economy disintegrates within weeks. But while merchant princes were growing absurdly wealthy in Europe, a slow-burning fuse was being lit in Western Europe that would eventually blow an entire monarchy to pieces. For centuries, the French crown enforced a deeply hated, wildly oppressive tax on salt known as the gabelle. Every citizen over the age of 8 was legally forced to purchase a mandatory quota of salt every week from state-owned warehouses at inflated prices. If you tried to buy cheaper salt from a neighboring region, you were branded a smuggler. The punishment was brutal: public floggings, years of forced labor rowing galleys in the Navy, or execution on the gallows. By the late 18th century, thousands of ordinary peasants were being thrown into prison every year just for trying to season their food without imperial permission. The rage reached a boiling point in 1789. When the starving citizens of Paris marched on the Bastille, they weren't just demanding bread and political representation. They were demanding the total abolition of the gabelle. One of the very first acts of the French Revolution was to smash the salt tax houses to the ground. The obsession with controlling a basic mineral had pushed a superpower into total bloody anarchy. Across the Atlantic, salt was deciding the fate of a brand new nation. During the American Revolutionary War, the British Royal Navy targeted American salt works with surgical precision. British commanders knew that if the Continental Army couldn't salt their pork and beef, Washington's troops would rot from the inside out in their winter camps. Defending salt supply lines became as critical as defending gunpowder reserves. Decades later, during the American Civil War, Union forces launched relentless, devastating raids on southern salt works like Saltville, Virginia, effectively crippling the Confederacy's logistics and starving their troops long before the final surrenders were signed. Then, at the dawn of the 20th century, human ingenuity finally unlocked the secrets of modern chemistry, and in doing so, shattered salt's 5,000-year stranglehold on global power. With the invention of industrial refrigeration and advanced geological mining, salt transformed overnight from a rare, sacred luxury into an abundant, ultra-cheap commodity. The mineral that used to command armies and bankrupt empires was suddenly packaged into paper cylinders and placed on every kitchen table on Earth for pennies. We forgot. We forgot that the roads we drive on were carved by creatures hunting for salt. We forgot that our modern banking systems, our corporate salaries, and our global trade networks were forged in the heat of salt monopolies. We forgot that millions of lives were traded to control rock formations beneath the Earth. The next time you pick up a salt shaker, pause for just a second before you sprinkle it over your meal. Look at those tiny, translucent crystals resting on your food. You are holding the silent engine of human civilization, the white gold that built empires, ignited revolutions, and kept the flame of human life burning through the darkest eras of history.